My fiancée slept with her ex while I covered her tuition, so I disappeared quietly and what happened next shattered her life. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for most of my relationship, I honestly believed love meant putting someone else's dreams before my own. I met her in college, during one of those weeks where everything seemed to be crashing down at once, tuition overdue, part-time shifts piling on, and finals looming like a dark cloud. She looked exhausted, her backpack slung low, papers spilling out, and somehow I just stepped in. "Hey, let me cover that for you this month," I said, trying to keep it casual, but I meant it. I didn't hesitate. I wanted her to breathe, to chase her ambitions without constantly looking over her shoulder. From that moment, my role became automatic. I paid tuition, picked up groceries, covered rent whenever her paycheck fell short. I learned the rhythm of her life, when she studied late into the night, when she skipped meals, how every stress line on her forehead seemed to deepen with each passing day. And she framed it as teamwork. "We're building something together," she'd whisper with a smile, her hand brushing mine, and I swallowed every compliment like it was gold. It felt validating, like all the long hours I worked were finally worth it. Friends would laugh, shake their heads, and say, "Dude, you're too good to be true." I'd just shrug, feeling pride instead of doubt. Supporting her wasn't a burden, it was love, wasn't it? But sometimes, late at night, when I counted bills and balances, a small voice in my head whispered something I didn't want to hear. What if she's getting used to this? What if my devotion isn't appreciated the way I think it is? I tried to dismiss it, telling myself I was overthinking. Still, there were fleeting moments, a hidden glance at her phone, a pause in her laugh, a hesitation in her eyes, that planted tiny seeds of unease. I didn't know it yet, but those seeds were about to grow, and what I thought was love was about to be tested in ways I couldn't imagine. Things felt perfect at first. She was thriving in school, acing exams I barely understood, and I felt this swell of pride every time she'd text me late at night. I did it. I passed my midterms. I'd grin at my phone like a fool and slip a little extra into her account just to make sure she never had to stress about food or rent again. It wasn't just money, it was pride, it was love, it was the idea that together, we could make life smooth, effortless, and beautiful. We celebrated little wins like we were starring in some college romance montage. Friday nights spent at the library turned into celebratory dinners where she'd laugh over burnt pasta and my jokes I barely remembered making. She'd rest her head on my shoulder and whisper, "You make this all bearable," and I felt untouchable, like I was doing exactly what a partner should do. Friends called me a saint, but it never felt like a sacrifice, I thought it felt like destiny. Then there were the casual mentions of her ex. At first, they didn't bother me. "Oh, he's funny," she'd say, or, "We went to the same study group back then." I nodded, smiled, and told myself it was harmless reminiscing, that everyone had a past. But some nights, after she'd fallen asleep with her phone pressed to her chest, I'd notice a lingering look, a subtle hesitation in her laughter when his name came up in conversation. I tried to ignore it. I told myself trust was everything, that our future was bigger than petty jealousy. Yet, the tiniest doubt started to creep in, like a shadow in the corner of a room I refused to look at. And while I worked harder, stretched myself thinner, and dreamt bigger to match hers, I couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was quietly slipping through the cracks. I should have noticed it then. I should have seen the signs. But I didn't. Instead, I kept building that dream life, unaware that the foundation beneath us was already cracking. It started with small things, tiny inconsistencies that I told myself I was imagining. She'd say she was at the library until midnight, but friends would casually mention seeing her elsewhere. I convinced myself it was nothing, stress, exhaustion, maybe even forgetfulness. But that nagging feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. It was like walking through a fog where I could sense danger, but I couldn't see it yet. Late nights became routine. I'd work until my fingers cramped, then check in with her, expecting the usual sleepy smile and a whispered, "Good night." Instead, I'd get vague responses, her eyes darting to her phone, her hand lingering over the screen as if it held some secret I wasn't supposed to know. "Just finishing up a project," she'd mutter, but the tone was defensive, the kind that made your stomach twist. I'd nod, forcing a smile, telling myself it was fine, trust her, right? Even the way she touched me started to feel different. Quick pats, distracted hugs, her mind clearly elsewhere. The warmth I'd relied on for reassurance was fading, replaced by a subtle distance I couldn't explain. I remember one evening, standing in the kitchen, she laughed at a message and my curiosity got the better of me. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She hesitated, a small, almost imperceptible flinch, before saying, "Oh, just someone from class." Something about that pause felt like a door creaking open, one I wasn't supposed to see. And suddenly, the fantasy of our perfect life felt a little off-kilter, as though the ground beneath me was quietly shifting. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I was frozen, part fear, part disbelief. I didn't know it yet, but those small, uneasy moments were the first threads of a web that would soon trap me completely. It was a Saturday afternoon when one of her college friends cornered me outside the library. "Hey. I don't want to upset you, but I saw her with her ex last week," they said quietly, eyes darting around. My stomach dropped like I'd been pushed off a cliff. I wanted to laugh it off, to say it was nothing, to believe the words were some cruel mistake, but the gut-wrenching feeling in my chest told me otherwise. I walked home numb, the spring air hitting my face, but nothing felt fresh. Every laugh, every smile, every late-night phone call replayed in my head. The subtle flinches, the distracted touches, the tiny inconsistencies, they all lined up now like evidence screaming at me. I tried to shake it, telling myself I was imagining things, that it was paranoia. But the doubt had taken root, growing in the cracks I'd ignored. That evening, I asked her casually, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey. I heard a weird rumor. Were you hanging out with your ex last week?" Her eyes flicked to mine, a shadow of panic flashing across them. "What? No. Why would you even think that?" she replied, voice sharp, a little too defensive. The room suddenly felt smaller, air heavy, like we were both teetering on the edge of something neither of us wanted to confront. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But my mind refused, hammering away at the suspicion, the betrayal, the possibility that all those months of sacrifices meant nothing. Every corner of our apartment seemed tainted now, the quiet hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, even the scent of coffee she brewed in the mornings. It all felt like a mask hiding something ugly beneath. And yet, I stayed silent, afraid to act, afraid of being wrong, and maybe most of all, afraid of the truth I wasn't ready to face. I didn't realize then how close I was to the moment that would shatter everything I thought I knew about her. It hit me like a punch to the gut when I finally saw the messages. I wasn't snooping, at least, that's what I told myself, but her phone had been left unlocked, screen glowing in the dim light of our apartment. At first, I thought I was imagining things, a casual, "miss you," or, "can't wait to see you," could mean anything. But then the pictures came. Clear as day. Her and her ex, together, smiling, laughing, like nothing in our relationship existed at all. My hands shook, the phone slipping slightly before I caught it. I sat there for what felt like hours, the apartment silent except for the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking clock. Everything I had done, the late nights, the empty wallet at the end of the month, the constant worry for her well-being, it all felt like it had been swallowed by a lie. I remember the moment vividly, my chest tight, stomach churning, eyes burning, realizing that my devotion, my sacrifices, had been manipulated. She didn't just cheat, she exploited me. I confronted her, voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. I saw the messages. The pictures. How could you? I asked, my words catching like dry paper in a fire. She froze, a flicker of guilt flashing in her eyes, but then she forced a smile. "It's not what it looks like," she said, and for a second, I wanted to believe her, wanted the world to be normal again. But the evidence was brutal, undeniable. For the first time, clarity pierced through the heartbreak. I realized I had been building someone else's dream, and she didn't care about mine, or me. Anger, pain, and a cold, calculating resolve began to take root inside me. I didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't cry in front of her. I simply felt the weight of the betrayal, and a quiet thought settled in my mind: I can't fix this, but I can control what happens next. And in that moment, I knew everything was about to change, but I had no idea how far this would go. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I didn't let her see the storm raging inside me. Instead, I did the one thing she'd never expect: I disappeared quietly. Over the next few days, I slowly cut off every link she had to me. My phone went silent, my social media vanished, even our shared accounts I closed without a word. No confrontation, no drama. Just absence. Walking through the city that evening, the cold air biting my cheeks, I felt an odd mix of heartbreak and relief. For the first time in months, I wasn't tethered to her needs, her lies, her manipulations. I watched people around me laugh, talk, live their lives, and for a moment, I envied them, then realized I was reclaiming the life I'd lost in the pursuit of someone else's. Every step I took away from her apartment, away from our history, felt like shedding a layer of suffocating weight. She tried reaching out immediately. Messages, calls, emails, each one a sharp reminder of what I had been to her, a safety net she never appreciated. "Please, let's talk," one read. Another, "I can explain everything, I promise." I didn't respond. Not even once. The silence was deliberate, cold, a punishment in itself. Watching her scramble in frustration and confusion without saying a word was strangely empowering. And yet, I felt a strange pang of empathy. I wasn't cruel, I wasn't enjoying this. I simply understood that some lessons can't be taught with words. Some people only learn when consequences hit them directly. As the days passed, I saw her frantic messages diminish, replaced by the weight of reality settling in. Little did she know, the absence wasn't just about punishment, it was about control, about reclaiming my life, about letting natural consequences unfold in a way that words could never enforce. And as I walked past the streets we once shared, I realized something terrifying for her. She had no idea that the life she had taken for granted was already slipping irreversibly away. From a distance, I started noticing how quickly her world was unraveling. I didn't stalk her, I didn't need to, but mutual friends would casually drop updates, and each one felt like another brick falling from the facade she had built. Classes she once excelled in were slipping. Deadlines were missed. Group projects she had been leading began falling apart, and the subtle panic in her voice when someone mentioned her responsibilities reached me indirectly, like whispers of a storm I had set in motion without ever touching a finger. I watched, a strange mixture of relief and sorrow swirling inside me. Relief because I no longer had to carry her burdens, no longer had to pour my life into someone who didn't respect it. Sorrow because I realized what this woman had become, a shell of charm and confidence now cracking under the pressure she had ignored for months. One friend said, "She's really struggling, man. I think she's realizing she can't just coast anymore." My chest tightened at that, not with regret, but with the validation of justice in action. The frantic messages she sent me continued, each more desperate than the last. "Please, we can fix this. I'll pay you back, I swear. Just, don't leave me," she begged in texts I deliberately didn't open. Each unread message, each unanswered call, was a silent hammer striking her illusion of control. I never gloated, I didn't need to. My disappearance, my absence, was punishment enough. Even everyday things she used to take for granted began to slip: her friends' patience, her reputation in class, the stability she assumed would always be there. Every time I heard about a new setback, I felt it in my chest, the subtle satisfaction of seeing consequences meet actions. But more than satisfaction, there was a lesson forming, both for her and for me. And yet, despite everything falling apart, she still didn't understand the full scale of what she had lost, or who she had underestimated entirely. The stories I heard from friends made my chest tighten, not with joy, but with a grim acknowledgement of reality. Her academic performance had plummeted, projects incomplete, deadlines missed, professors growing frustrated. Tuition payments she had once relied on me for were now overdue, leaving her scrambling for loans she didn't know how to secure. The ex she thought she could rely on had moved on, leaving her isolated in a world she'd assumed would always support her. Even socially, things started to fall apart. Friends she had once leaned on started noticing cracks, subtle inconsistencies in her stories, desperation creeping into her tone. The confidence she had flaunted, the charm that had so easily drawn people in, began to fade. Lunches were missed, casual invites ignored, and her frantic calls for help became increasingly pointed and urgent. I heard snippets of conversations. "I don't know how she let things get this bad, she's completely panicking now," and it hit me how fragile the life she had built on manipulation really was. Meanwhile, I stayed silent. I didn't need to intervene. Watching from a distance, I felt a complex mix of relief, sorrow, and a cold sense of vindication. Every struggle she faced, every consequence she hadn't prepared for, felt like a natural correction to months of deceit and betrayal. At night, when the city was quiet, I imagined her sitting in her apartment, phone buzzing endlessly, a pile of unopened bills on the counter, the weight of reality pressing down on her like a physical force. And while I walked my own path, lighter and free, the contrast between us could not have been more stark. And yet, she still didn't fully grasp how completely her life was unraveling, or how much the one person she had taken for granted was watching silently, knowing that the consequences were only beginning. I heard through a mutual friend that she had hit rock bottom, and the way it was described made my stomach twist. She had been evicted from her apartment after missing rent for months, her academic record was in jeopardy, and the ex she had leaned on so casually had cut all contact. Even her friends, the ones she had relied on for validation and support, had started stepping back, weary of her constant lies and excuses. The girl who had once laughed and charmed her way through life was now desperate, isolated, and terrified. The messages she sent me were frantic and unhinged. "Please. I'll fix this. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me like this," one read. Another, "I know I screwed up, but we can make it right. Please respond." I didn't open them. I didn't respond. Every unread message, every unanswered call, was a silent testament to the consequences of betrayal. Her frantic desperation became my witness to the truth I had only just realized: her selfish actions had real, unavoidable outcomes. I remember the first night I actually let myself feel it, the sorrow, the heartbreak, and the satisfaction all tangled into one. I sat alone in my apartment, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the silence, and thought about the months I had sacrificed for her. The long nights, the endless bills, the emotional labor, it all felt like it had been erased in an instant. But in that emptiness, clarity came. I didn't need to yell, I didn't need to confront her, and I didn't need revenge in the traditional sense. The universe was doing the work for me. Her world had collapsed in ways she never anticipated, and while I felt a twinge of sadness for her pain, it was tempered by the recognition that this was the natural outcome of her choices. For the first time, I understood the weight of betrayal, not just hers, but the price I had paid silently. And as I leaned back in my chair, staring at the darkened city outside, I realized, this was the lowest point, but everything was about to shift in ways she could never predict. I didn't gloat. I didn't call her, confront her, or publicly expose her. Instead, I let silence do the work, the most powerful tool I had. Each day I stayed away, each text I ignored, and each absence I maintained became a mirror she couldn't avoid. Her life continued to crumble without me lifting a finger, tuition deadlines missed, social connections fraying, and even the ex she had secretly leaned on walking away completely. It was quiet, invisible justice, and somehow, it felt infinitely more satisfying than revenge could have been. I focused on rebuilding myself. Mornings were for running, afternoons for work, nights for quiet reflection. I found joy in small things I had neglected for months: cooking, reading, reconnecting with friends, and slowly reclaiming the freedom I had given up. The contrast between our lives was stark, her desperation and chaos versus my growing independence and clarity. I could feel the tension of the past months finally lifting, replaced by a quiet power, a sense of control I hadn't realized I'd lost. Updates from friends kept trickling in. "She's panicking now," one said. "Everything she counted on is gone." And every time I heard it, I felt validation, not just for the pain she caused me, but for the strength it took to walk away without a fight. I didn't need to gloat or make her feel small, life itself was doing that for me. My absence was the reminder she hadn't been prepared for. Actions have consequences, and betrayal has a price. Even as the world around me normalized, I remained vigilant, aware of the subtle ways life could continue to teach lessons. And through it all, I realized something powerful: control, dignity, and silence could be more devastating than any confrontation. But she still hadn't fully grasped the scale of what she had lost, or the long-term consequences that were quietly, inevitably unfolding. Months passed, and my life slowly began to stabilize in ways I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't chasing her approval anymore, I wasn't covering her mistakes or worrying about her lies. I was free to focus on myself, my goals, and my well-being. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of empowerment that wasn't tied to anyone else. Every morning, I woke up knowing that my time, energy, and effort belonged to me, and that was a feeling no betrayal could take away. I reflected on everything I had endured: the heartbreak, the manipulation, the constant giving without reciprocation. It hurt, of course, but it also taught me the hard lessons that no advice, no pep talk, could have imparted. I realized my worth wasn't determined by how much I could give someone else, but by how I protected my boundaries and refused to let my generosity be exploited. My silence, my absence, had become my power. I heard occasional updates about her. Friends would whisper about her struggles: school, work, social life, all consequences of choices she had made without regard for anyone else. And I didn't feel glee, or revenge, or spite. I felt peace. I understood now that the most satisfying justice comes not from confrontation, but from reclaiming your life and letting natural consequences unfold. At the same time, I began to notice a quiet shift in myself. I laughed more freely, slept more peacefully, and started investing time in things that truly mattered to me. For the first time, I could fully embrace the idea of living on my terms. But even as I thrived, I knew she still hadn't fully understood what she lost, or the depth of the person she underestimated. And that realization, more than anything, was the quietest, most powerful vindication of all. Then came the moment that sealed everything, completely and irreversibly. I learned she had tried to reach out, desperate to reconcile after everything had fallen apart. Emails, texts, even mutual friends acting as messengers, but I was gone. Completely untouchable, unreachable, and thriving. The girl who had once slept with her ex while I quietly supported her dreams realized, too late, that I wasn't just angry or hurt, I had simply moved on. I didn't gloat. I didn't call her out or parade her mistakes for the world to see. I didn't need to. Her attempts at control, at manipulation, at regaining what she had taken for granted, fell flat. The consequences she had ignored were now fully visible in her life, undeniable and irreversible. Meanwhile, I had reclaimed everything she had ever taken from me: my time, my peace, and my sense of self-worth. The absence alone was a hammer she could never undo. Life for me had shifted entirely. I was thriving, financially, emotionally, mentally. I pursued goals I had put on hold, rebuilt friendships, and embraced a freedom I hadn't felt in years. I didn't just survive the betrayal, I became stronger because of it. The heartbreak, the deception, the sleepless nights, they had forged a clarity and resilience I could never have imagined. And then, the final twist: one quiet evening, I realized she had finally understood, truly understood, that I was gone, and that her attempts to manipulate, cheat, and control had cost her everything. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public humiliation, just the quiet, absolute realization of loss. That alone was more powerful than any revenge I could have staged. I smiled softly, thinking back on the months of pain and sacrifice. I hadn't needed to fight, hadn't needed to shout. I had simply reclaimed myself, and in doing so, I had let the natural consequences of betrayal play out perfectly. The lesson was complete, the chapter closed, and I finally felt the peace and empowerment I had been seeking all along.